The wind howled through the skeletal remains of what was once downtown Portland. Windows shattered, cars abandoned, and a thick blanket of silence smothered the city like a shroud. In the middle of the cracked street, littered with debris and memories, walked a lone figure, Daniel Knox. Once an ordinary high school teacher, Daniel now moved like a ghost, his backpack sagging with salvaged supplies, and a steel pipe in his right hand, his only reliable companion. His boots crunched over broken glass as he passed by the hollow shell of a coffee shop where he used to grab his morning espresso. Now, vines crept over its walls, and something far darker than time had claimed its insides. It had been 287 days since the fall. The infection spread faster than anyone could have predicted. A mutated strain of a virus initially thought to be a bad flu, it turned its hosts into mindless, rabid creatures within hours. People didn't just die, they transformed. Flesh rotted, eyes clouded, and their screams became the soundtrack of the end. Humanity collapsed in less than 2 months. Governments failed. Military defenses crumbled. Entire cities became graveyards, and Daniel survived them all. Not because he was the strongest. Not because he was the smartest. But because he kept moving. Daniel had no destination today, just a goal: find shelter before nightfall. The undead were sensitive to sound, but they hunted best in the dark. The sun was already beginning to sink behind the ruined skyscrapers, bleeding orange into the sky like a final warning. As he crossed through an alley, he heard a faint shuffle behind him. He froze. Every instinct sharpened. Carefully, he turned around, pipe raised. Nothing. And then, a loud clang echoed behind a dumpster. His heart thudded against his chest. He stepped forward cautiously and peered behind it, expecting to see decaying hands, snarling teeth. But it wasn't one of them. It was a dog. Dirty, ribs showing, but alive. The golden retriever backed away, eyes wide and trembling. Daniel lowered his pipe slowly. "Hey, hey! I'm not gonna hurt you." The dog didn't bark. It just stared, judging whether to trust him. Daniel reached into his bag and pulled out a half-eaten granola bar, crumbling it and tossing the bits toward the animal. Hunger overpowered fear, and the dog crept forward, licking up the food with quiet desperation. Daniel smiled faintly. "Looks like I'm not the only one still standing." He didn't realize how much he missed company until now. Later that evening, Daniel secured a temporary shelter inside an abandoned bookstore. The back room had a lockable door, thick walls, and a roof that didn't leak. He reinforced the entrance with a shelf and stacked chairs against it. The dog had followed him. He gave it a piece of jerky and laid an old coat down for it to sleep on. It curled up without hesitation. For the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't feel completely alone. He sat by a shattered window, watching the night roll in. In the distance, a low, throaty growl echoed, not an animal, not human. One of them. Daniel gripped his pipe tighter. They usually moved in small packs, drawn to any sign of life. He couldn't risk light or noise. The dog stirred at the sound, ears perked up but didn't growl. It knew silence was survival. Daniel glanced around the darkened room. Once, this place was filled with stories. Now, the real world had become the most terrifying one of all. Still, he wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not while he could still fight, still walk, still breathe. A loud thump outside snapped him back to alertness. He stood up quietly, motioning the dog to stay still. Another thump, closer now, followed by a dragging sound. He crept to the door and listened. Scrape. His stomach turned. That sound, the dragging of half-functioning limbs. An infected. Maybe more than one. He backed away slowly. The room had no other exit. If they smelled him, they'd claw at the door until it broke. If he made a noise, they'd call others. He crouched, pipe in hand, ready for a fight he didn't want. Minutes passed. The sound moved away, then silence. He didn't move for another hour. Eventually, he sat down, heart still racing, the dog curling next to him. He placed a hand on its back. "Guess you're stuck with me now," he whispered. Outside, the undead ruled the world. But in this tiny room, for one night, Daniel wasn't alone. And that was enough. The early morning light seeped through the broken window of the bookstore, casting long shadows across the dusty floor. Daniel hadn't slept much. Between the fear of being found and the subtle whimpers the dog made in its sleep, he spent most of the night on edge, pipe in hand, eyes scanning every corner of the dark room. But morning had come, and with it, a new day of survival. The dog, now officially part of his team, stretched and looked at him expectantly. Daniel had no idea what to call it. He wasn't even sure if naming it was a good idea. Getting attached to anything or anyone in this world came with a price. But still. "Scout," he muttered. "You look like a scout." The golden retriever wagged its tail once, as if approving the name. Daniel packed what little food he had left. Supplies were running low. He needed water, batteries, maybe even a new radio. He'd heard nothing on his old one in weeks, but he still clung to the hope that someone, somewhere, was broadcasting a signal. Today, he decided to head underground, into the subway tunnels. Dangerous? Absolutely. But most of the infected avoided tight, enclosed spaces during the day. And Daniel knew there was a military supply cache rumored to have been set up in one of the central stations during the early days of the outbreak. If it hadn't been looted, it might hold the key to lasting another week. He and Scout made their way through crumbling side streets and broken alleyways, staying low and avoiding the main roads. The city was quiet today. Too quiet. The subway entrance was blocked by a fallen streetlight and a collapsed vending machine. Daniel moved it just enough to slip through. The smell hit him instantly: wet concrete, rusted metal, and something worse, death. Scout whimpered, hesitating at the entrance. Daniel knelt beside him. "I get it," he whispered. "But we have to try." Together, they descended into the darkness. The subway tunnels were like another world. The flickering emergency lights painted everything in pulses of red and white. Posters for movies that would never release, advertisements from a world that didn't exist anymore, all still clung to the walls like ghosts. Daniel gripped his flashlight and moved slowly, ears straining for any sound. Scout followed closely, tail low. They passed by a few old camps, evidence that others had come here before. Makeshift beds, cans, notes scrawled on walls. One said, "Don't go past the yellow line. They stay in the deeper tunnels." Daniel stared at it for a moment before moving on. When they reached the central station, his heart skipped a beat. A barricade had been set up, crates, sandbags, even a gun rack, though all the weapons were long gone. But it meant the military had been here. And that meant supplies might still be nearby. He moved quickly, searching every corner. Scout sniffed around and barked once, softly. Daniel ran to where the dog stood, pawing at a locker that had been shoved behind a row of chairs. Inside, 2 water bottles, a flare gun, a sealed med kit, and, best of all, a half-functioning radio. Daniel grabbed it all and stuffed it into his bag, adrenaline pumping. He clicked the radio on. Static. He fiddled with the dial. More static. Then, a crackle. A faint voice. "If you can hear this, Sector 4, safe zone, repeat, Sector 4. It was broken and barely audible, but it was something. His hands trembled. Suddenly, Scout growled low. From the far end of the tunnel, came the echo of footsteps. Uneven. Shuffling. Not alone. Daniel turned off the radio and stuffed it into his pack. He backed away slowly, grabbing his pipe. Scout remained silent but alert. Then he saw them. 3 figures, barely visible under the dim lights, stumbling through the tunnel. Their eyes glowed faintly in the flicker. Skin peeled from their faces. Jaws hung loose. Infected. He looked around. The only way out was back the way they came, or through the rails, deeper into the tunnel. The infected hadn't seen them yet. Daniel made a choice. He grabbed Scout, vaulted over the tracks, and disappeared into the shadows of the next tunnel. The deeper tunnels were colder. Tighter. The sounds of the world above vanished completely. Daniel's breath echoed. Scout padded beside him nervously. Suddenly, a different sound caught his attention, a steady, rhythmic tapping, like something metallic hitting the tunnel wall. He froze. That wasn't an infected. That was deliberate. He turned off his flashlight. And then, a voice. "You shouldn't be down here." Daniel whipped around, heart pounding. From the darkness ahead, a figure emerged, torchlight revealing a woman, dirty and armored in scavenged gear, holding a crossbow. "You just led them right to us," she said coldly. Behind her, Daniel saw at least 5 other people in a hidden alcove, armed, watching him like predators. Scout growled. Daniel slowly raised his hands. "I didn't mean to." She cut him off. "You've got 10 seconds to tell me why I shouldn't feed you to the tunnels." Daniel didn't flinch, though the crossbow pointed directly at his chest told him this woman wasn't bluffing. Her eyes were sharp, cold, like someone who had lost too much to care anymore. "I'm just passing through," he said calmly, hands raised. "I didn't know anyone was down here." Scout stood at his side, fur raised, growling low. The woman's torchlight flickered against the grimy subway walls, casting tall, swaying shadows of the people behind her. There were 6 in total, some older, some young, all armed in one way or another. They looked lean, tired, and more dangerous than the infected. "Passing through," she said. "You brought the rotters right to our doorstep. You expect me to believe that was an accident?" Daniel took a breath. "I didn't know this tunnel was occupied. I came looking for supplies. Found a radio, picked up a signal. Heard something about Sector 4. Safe zone. That's it." The woman's expression didn't soften. But the name Sector 4 triggered a reaction. A man in the back, a gray-bearded survivor in a torn leather jacket, leaned forward. "You heard the Sector 4 broadcast?" he asked, voice raspy with disbelief. Daniel nodded. "It was faint. Static mostly. But it's real. Someone out there is still alive. Organized." The woman lowered the crossbow, slightly. Another of the group, a younger guy with a missing ear and twitchy fingers, shook his head. "Could be a trap. Could be bait to lure the desperate." Daniel looked around. "You're already living underground in a dead city. What more do you have to lose?" The woman stepped closer, eyeing him. "My name's Mira," she finally said. "We've been down here for 3 months. We don't trust easily. Strangers get us killed." Daniel lowered his hands slowly. "Name's Daniel. This is Scout." Scout wagged his tail once, then resumed growling at the twitchy man. Mira gestured toward a half-broken sign behind her that once read "Maintenance Access, Restricted." "Come with me," she said. "But if you try anything stupid, you won't make it back out." Inside the hidden alcove, the survivors had turned an old maintenance bay into a rough shelter, complete with hammocks, storage crates, and even a makeshift cooking setup. Daniel noticed how efficiently everything was arranged. These people knew how to survive. They offered him food, canned beans and dry crackers, which he accepted gratefully. Mira sat across from him, crossbow still resting on her lap. "You said the broadcast mentioned Sector 4, she said, her voice calmer now. Daniel nodded. "That's all I got. No coordinates, no names. Just a repeat message." It was fading out. An older woman named Helen leaned in. "We've heard whispers of it too. Some say it's a military remnant. Others think it's just refugees who managed to create a safe zone. Real or not, we've never had proof." Daniel pulled the radio from his bag and set it on the table. "Try it yourself." Mira fiddled with the dial. Static, then. "Sector 4, repeat, if you're hearing this, coordinates." Then silence. The group looked at each other. "This changes everything," Mira said. But not everyone was convinced. "I don't like this," grunted the twitchy man, whose name turned out to be Ellis. "He shows up out of nowhere, brings rotters behind him, and suddenly he's got a magic radio? Too convenient." "It's not magic," Daniel replied. "It's desperation." Mira raised her hand, silencing Ellis. "I don't trust him either. But we've got to consider the facts. This may be the only lead we get." Daniel spoke up. "I'm heading that way. Whether you come or not, I'm going to find out if Sector 4 is real." A beat of silence. Then Mira asked, "You sure you're not looking to just save yourself?" Daniel looked at Scout, then back at Mira. "I've been alone for too long. I know what it feels like to have nothing but your shadow. I'm not here to take from anyone. I'm offering a way out." Later that night, as the others slept in rotated watch shifts, Mira approached Daniel as he sat beside Scout. "You know," she said, "we had someone like you once. Said he could lead us out. Got us ambushed. We lost 3 people that night." "I'm not him," Daniel replied. "I hope not." She paused. "You get us to Sector 4, and maybe you'll earn that trust." Daniel looked at her. "What about Ellis?" She smirked faintly. "Don't mind him. He's hated everyone since day one. If you make it through tomorrow without getting us killed, he'll hate you a little less." Scout nudged Myra's leg, tail wagging. For a second, her face softened. She crouched and scratched behind the dog's ears. "We move at dawn," she said. "Hope you're ready for hell." Daniel nodded. "I've been living in it." Outside, deep in the darkness of the tunnels, something growled low. A sound not quite human echoed through the vents. Something was listening. Something was following. And it was hungry. They moved at first light, or at least what passed for it underground. Mira led the group through narrow maintenance corridors, lit only by cracked lanterns and flashlight beams. Scout padded silently beside Daniel, ears twitching with every strange sound echoing through the tunnels. The air was different down here, thicker, damp, and laced with something foul. A stench that clung to the skin. "We avoid the main tracks," Mira whispered, keeping her crossbow close. "Too open. They roam there." "Who exactly is they?" Daniel asked. Mira didn't answer at first. Then, "Not just the infected. Something else lives in these tunnels now." Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Mutated? Maybe. Maybe not. We call them the burrowers." She glanced at him. "We don't see them often. But when we do, people disappear." They passed old maintenance rooms and collapsed stairwells, weaving deeper through an underground map Mira seemed to have memorized. Every so often, Ellis would stop to check for sounds, while Helen kept tally of their steps, marking their route with chalk on the walls. The silence was deafening. Then, just as they reached what looked like an old generator room, Scout stopped. Ears perked. Head tilted. "What is it?" Daniel whispered, kneeling beside him. Scout didn't bark. He didn't move. He just stared down a vent shaft at the corner of the room. A low, gurgling sound drifted out. Ellis raised his weapon. "Nope. No, this place is wrong." The floor suddenly thudded, like something heavy had just landed somewhere below them. Everyone froze. The light bulb above them flickered. Helen clutched her necklace. "We need to move. Now." Mira didn't argue. "Go. Stay close." They began moving faster now, all sense of stealth abandoned. The growls behind the walls got louder. Metal groaned. A faint scratching echoed through the pipes. Then came the scream. From behind them, something roared, deep, guttural, and wrong. Daniel spun, flashlight catching a glimpse of something massive slithering through the shadows. It wasn't human. It wasn't even infected. It moved like smoke but hit the walls like thunder. "Run!" Mira shouted. They bolted down the hallway. Scout stayed right by Daniel's side, barking now, short, panicked bursts. Behind them, something gave chase. Heavy thuds. Wet slaps. Chittering and screeches that sounded like twisted laughter. Daniel grabbed Myra's arm. Which way? Maintenance ladder. Go left. They reached a side door half buried under debris. Ellis and Daniel shoved it open, and inside they found a rusted emergency ladder leading upward through an old vertical shaft. Climb. Myra barked. Helen went first, followed by Ellis. Myra ushered Daniel up next. He grabbed Scout, hoisting him up as the dog scrambled against the rungs. Then Myra climbed last, pausing only to throw a lit flare into the tunnel below. For a second, the flare revealed the creature. It wasn't just one. It was many. Pale, eyeless things with spider-like limbs and bloated torsos. Their skin shimmered wetly in the red glow. One hissed, its teeth black and needle-thin. Then the flare went out. They climbed for what felt like forever. The noise eventually faded into a terrifying silence. Finally, they emerged into an abandoned utility room far above the creature's lair. Everyone collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. Daniel wiped sweat from his brow. What the hell were those? Myra leaned against the wall, her face pale. Things that shouldn't exist. They live down here? Daniel asked. They hunt. Usually at night. They follow vibrations. Sound. She looked at him. That flare may have bought us time. But we can't stay here long. Helen sat trembling. We're not safe, are we? Not even underground. No, Myra said. Especially not underground. After some rest, the group pressed on, more cautiously now. They eventually reached an old security checkpoint leading to a surface access tunnel. Daniel climbed a rusted ladder and cracked open a metal hatch. Warm air hit his face. Above them, daylight filtered through a shattered skylight. The remains of a parking structure surrounded them, cars long abandoned, some burned, others crushed. The city once again. But quieter than before. Too quiet. Scout sniffed the air and whined softly. Myra joined Daniel, scanning the horizon. We're close. That broadcast, it was traced to a signal hub 2 sectors east of here. Daniel nodded. Then we keep going. Ellis muttered behind them. And pray those things don't follow us. As they stepped onto the streets, Daniel took one last glance back at the manhole they had climbed out of. The hatch slowly creaked shut behind them. But for a split second, he thought he saw movement in the shadows. A faint glimmer of pale, shifting eyes. Watching. Waiting. The streets were like graveyards. Empty, still, and echoing with the ghosts of a city long dead. Daniel led the group through cracked sidewalks and overturned vehicles. The buildings loomed around them, shattered glass, burned storefronts, and graffiti from desperate hands that had tried to leave behind warnings or hope. Some read, "We tried." They didn't listen. Others simply marked places where the last screams were never answered. Myra moved beside Daniel, her steps light, cautious. Her crossbow always at the ready. Signal towers this way, she said, pointing east. If that broadcast came from anywhere nearby, it'll be there. Scout suddenly growled and barked at a parked delivery van. The group froze. Daniel knelt and peered inside, nothing. Just an old skeleton slumped in the driver's seat, its jaw twisted open in a silent scream. Good boy, Daniel said softly, rubbing Scout's head. Stay sharp. They moved again, slower now. Ellis kicked a rock aside. We shouldn't be here in daylight. Daniel looked at him. Why? Better visibility. Exactly, Ellis muttered. They see us too. Myra cut in. He's not wrong. Runners, the fast ones, they're more active during the day. Still some traces of who they were. They hunt like predators. Helen added, and they don't come alone. Daniel scanned the skyline. We need to get to high ground. If we reach the tower, We might be able to confirm if Sector 4 is real or just another ghost story." No one responded, but the pace quickened. The signal tower was within sight by noon. It rose like a skeletal monument in the distance, its rusted frame wrapped in vines and wires. But between the survivors and that tower stood an open plaza, too wide, too exposed. Daniel motioned for the group to pause and took out binoculars. Scanning the area, he didn't see any movement at first. Then, a flicker. Something darted between two broken benches. Then again, this time closer. "Movement," he whispered. "Not infected. Too fast, too coordinated." Mira narrowed her eyes. "Could be scavengers. Or worse," Ellis muttered. Daniel hesitated, then pointed toward a department store with mostly intact walls. "Let's cut through there. Less open. Might give us better angles." Mira nodded. "Do it." Inside the store, everything was frozen in time. Plastic mannequins with missing limbs stood like eerie guardians in the dust. Torn posters still hung from the ceilings advertising 75% off the end of season. Scout growled again, standing at attention near the entrance. Suddenly, glass shattered above them. Something dropped through the ceiling tiles and landed behind a counter. Everyone drew weapons. A figure emerged, thin, dirty, but human. A young girl. She looked no older than 12. Pale skin, wide eyes, and clutching a homemade spear. "Don't hurt me," she cried. Mira stepped forward. "We won't." "Are you alone?" The girl nodded, trembling. "They were here. The fast ones. I ran. Hid. They took my brother." Daniel approached slowly, kneeling. "What's your name?" "Lena." Scout sniffed her gently, then licked her hand. She smiled faintly through her tears. Daniel looked at Mira. "We can't leave her." Mira didn't argue. Ellis groaned. "More mouths to feed." "She's a kid," Daniel snapped. "We protect her." End of discussion. They exited the store cautiously, Lena now clinging to Helen's side. The signal tower was closer now, maybe 2 blocks away. Daniel raised the binoculars again, and spotted movement near its base. 4 figures, dressed in scavenger gear. Armed. They were hauling equipment and checking a generator near the tower's support beams. Daniel lowered the binoculars slowly. "There are people there," he said. "Not infected. Armed." Myra's voice was low. "Then we move carefully." "No," Daniel said. "Let me go first. If they see a group, they might panic. But one person, no threat." Mira hesitated. Then nodded. "Fine. But take this." She handed him a small flare. "Red if it goes bad. Green if we follow." Daniel looked down at Scout. "You stay, boy." Scout whined but obeyed. As Daniel approached the tower alone, his heart pounded. Every step felt like a gamble. When he was close enough to be seen, he raised his hands high and called out, "I'm not infected. I'm not armed. I only want to talk." Weapons immediately turned toward him. One of the scavengers, a tall man in tactical armor, stepped forward. "State your name and purpose." "Daniel. We heard your broadcast. Sector 4. We want to know if it's real." The man studied him. "You're not the first to come looking. Then is it real?" Another pause. "Yes," the man finally said. "Sector 4 exists. But it's not a sanctuary. It's a choice." Daniel frowned. "What does that mean?" But before the man could answer, a scream erupted from the street behind them. Daniel spun around. One of the fast ones had found the group. And where there's one, there's always more. The scream ripped through the air like a siren, and every muscle in Daniel's body locked tight. He turned just in time to see Scout charge into the open plaza, barking furiously. Helen was screaming. Lena stood frozen. Mira raised her crossbow. They had seconds, maybe less. From the shadows, the first fast one came sprinting into view. It was once a man, but now its body was twisted and lean, skin clinging to bones, eyes burning with an unnatural rage. Its movements were jerky and feral, but horrifyingly fast. Then came another. And another. Daniel spun to the man in tactical gear. We have to help them, now. The scavenger leader didn't hesitate. Team, defensive formation. Get the gate open. Daniel bolted back toward his group, Scout running alongside him. Mira loosed an arrow, clean shot to the neck of the first runner. It tumbled, flailing, but the others didn't slow. They're splitting up. Ellis shouted. They're flanking. Daniel skidded to a stop in front of Lena and scooped her up. Hold on tight. Ellis fired his pistol as another runner darted from behind a rusted car. The bullet hit, but it wasn't clean. The infected kept coming, screeching as it tackled him to the ground. No! Helen screamed. Daniel couldn't reach him in time. But Mira could. She rushed forward and drove her knife deep into the back of the infected skull, yanking Ellis free before the creature went limp. Move, she barked. They ran. Gunfire crackled behind them as the scavenger team opened up, drawing the infected's attention. Daniel didn't look back. He could hear the pounding footsteps, the snarls, the shrieks. Could feel the breath of the monsters closing in. They reached the base of the tower where a massive steel gate was now opening. One of the scavengers waved them in. Come on. Daniel ducked through with Lena in his arms. Helen, Mira, and Ellis followed. Scout was the last, slipping in just as the gate slammed shut behind them. Bang! A fast one slammed into the gate so hard the metal shook. More began piling against it, snarling and clawing. Inside, the survivors collapsed to the ground, panting, shaking, covered in grime and blood. The man in tactical gear approached, lowering his weapon. I'm Rourke, he said. Welcome to the outpost. The inside of the tower was fortified, reinforced walls, old solar panels, makeshift bunks, and crates of scavenged supplies. A tall radio antenna extended from the roof, blinking slowly with weak power. Daniel looked around in awe. You built all this? Rourke nodded. Over time. It's not Sector 4, but it's connected to it. Our signal reaches their outpost. We're what you might call a screening point. Screening point? Helen asked, confused. To find the right people, Rourke said. The ones who survive. The ones who fight back. Mira crossed her arms. And if we hadn't? You'd be dead. No one argued. Later that evening, the group gathered inside the tower's main room as Rourke briefed them. Sector 4 exists, he said, projecting a map on a cracked screen. A few hundred survivors. Organized. Protected. Deep underground in what used to be a military research facility. Then why are people being brought there? Daniel asked. Why broadcast at all? To find capable people, Rourke said. If we open the doors to everyone, we fall. But if we bring in those who can lead, fight, and rebuild, maybe the world gets another chance. Mira scowled. Sounds like selective survival. Rourke didn't flinch. It is. We don't have the luxury of idealism anymore. The group was silent. Then Daniel asked, what's next? Rourke gestured to the tower. Tomorrow, we head north. Sector 4 sent coordinates. We've got a narrow window and dangerous ground to cover. And the fast ones? Ellis asked. They're everywhere now, Rourke said grimly. And not just them. Something else has been moving. We've seen shadows. Heard noises. Sector 4 thinks they're evolving. Lena clutched Daniel's sleeve tighter. Mira whispered, the burrowers. Daniel's eyes met hers. Something worse was coming. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat on the rooftop with Scout beside him, the city stretched out below like a dead empire. Fires burned in the distance. Somewhere, something howled, not quite human. He looked up at the stars and wondered if hope still lived among them. Scout whined softly. Daniel smiled and scratched behind his ears. I know, boy. We're not out yet. Behind him, Mira approached with 2 cups of canned coffee. She handed one to Daniel. You did good today, she said quietly. So did you. They sipped in silence. Then Mira looked toward the horizon. You ready for what comes next? Daniel took a breath. No, he said. But I'm going anyway. At sunrise, the outpost stirred to life. Daniel tightened the straps on his backpack, checked the rounds in his weapon, and gave Scout a pat. The dog stood ready, eyes alert, tail still. Mira joined him, dressed in tactical gear, bow slung over her shoulder. Rourke says we move in 5. It's now or never. Daniel nodded, glancing around at the others. Ellis was inspecting a map one last time, while Helen helped Lena put on a makeshift helmet fashioned from an old bike shell. The girl looked frightened but determined, she had survived too much to give up now. The final leg of the journey would be the most dangerous. The route to Sector 4 passed through what used to be the industrial outskirts of the city. Now, it was a no-man's land, long abandoned, crawling with the infected and worse. Scout barked once. The gate creaked open. They stepped into the morning fog. They moved swiftly but quietly, Rourke's team flanking the group. The streets were a maze of collapsed structures and rusting machines. Smoke lingered in the air, and the stench of decay was stronger than ever. We avoid main roads, Rourke instructed. Too exposed. Stick to the alleys. They weaved through narrow corridors, past burned-out vehicles and warning signs smeared with blood. The silence was unnatural, broken only by distant screeches and the soft crunch of debris under their feet. Daniel felt the weight of every second. His mind raced. Were they being watched? Were the fast ones trailing them? Or was something worse already ahead? Then Mira held up her fist. Everyone stopped. Ahead, a low groaning echoed from a collapsed warehouse. A single infected dragged itself out, one leg broken, eyes milky white. Scout growled, ready to attack. Daniel stopped him with a hand. Let it go. Not worth the noise. They moved around it. But just as they passed, another growl erupted from behind the warehouse. Then another. And another. Within seconds, a pack of infected appeared, half running, half limping, all hungry. Go! Rourke shouted. Gunfire erupted. Mira fired 2 arrows in quick succession, dropping the first runners. Daniel held Lena close, sprinting through twisted metal and overgrown streets. Ellis stumbled but Helen yanked him forward. The noise brought more. From windows. From manholes. From ruined buses. Dozens of them. Daniel shouted, "That's too many. We won't outrun them. Then we make a stand." Rourke yelled. "Their tunnel entrance." He pointed to a cracked maintenance door beneath an overpass. They reached it as the infected closed in. Rourke and Mira held the line, firing non-stop as the others rushed inside. Daniel, last in, slammed the door shut just as Scout leaped in behind him. A metallic clang. Then silence. Only the sound of their heavy breathing. They were inside the tunnel. The tunnel reeked of mildew and rust. Their flashlights flickered across moldy walls and dripping pipes. It was narrow and suffocating, but it led straight toward the coordinates of Sector 4. Or so they hoped. For an hour they walked, weapons drawn, tension thick. Lena whispered, "Is it really there? Sector 4? Daniel looked down at her. "We're not stopping until we find out." Suddenly, the tunnel widened, and up ahead, faint lights glowed on the walls. Rourke paused. "That's new. Electric?" They approached cautiously. A metal panel in the wall slid open with a hiss. Voices shouted. Identify yourselves. Blinding lights hit them. Don't shoot. Daniel stepped forward, arms up. We heard your broadcast. We came all this way, we survived. A figure emerged, clean gear, a real uniform, the emblem of Sector 4 on the shoulder. You made it, the woman said, lowering her weapon. You're late. The group was ushered into a decontamination chamber. Warm water. Real food. Clean clothes. It felt surreal. Lena clutched Daniel's hand as they stepped through a steel door and into Sector 4. Underground, it was like a different world. Bright hallways. Hydroponic farms. A medical bay. Children laughing. People living. A man in a white coat approached them, smiling. Welcome to Sector 4. You've passed the hardest test of all, survival. Rourke gave Daniel a nod. Told you it was real. Daniel didn't smile. Not yet. Later, alone on a balcony overlooking the underground farms, Daniel leaned against the rail. Scout sat beside him, content. Mira joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. So, she said, do you think this is really it? The end of the road? Daniel took a deep breath. No. It's just another beginning. He looked out at the community below, doctors, engineers, fighters, survivors. He thought about everyone they had lost. Everyone they had saved. And the world still waiting to be rebuilt. We survived, he said quietly. But now, we have to live. Mira nodded. Together. Daniel smiled. For the first time in a long time, he believed it. The end.